morning. It's truly a pleasure to be with you this morning, and I like to join the chorus of fans of the Political Network for Values and thank Lola and her team for bringing us together on a regular basis. This is the fourth summit, and I agree with what Jose Antonio said yesterday. These summits are amazing. They truly energize us. And as Jose Antonio said, we return to our respective swamps, our respective capitals, full of energy, renewed energy to continue the battle of life and family. And so thank you so much for this, organizing these summits. I'd like to talk to you today from the perspective of a political strategist, a political activist, who works with a wide range of organizations in the United States and in Latin America to try to achieve political wins in the cause of life, family, and other conservative causes. And I'd like to focus particularly on the unprecedented attacks we're seeing against the dignity of the human person, the family, and fundamental freedoms across the Americas. It's abundantly clear that the progressive left feels emboldened by the success it has had this last 60 years in advancing its radical cultural program, particularly in the societies of the West, and it's determined to intensify and expand its focus to push their issues to the extreme. And let's be clear, their end game is to fundamentally transform society according to their ideological dogmas, redefining the human person and eradicating those natural institutions that are essential to the stability and the progress of our societies and that define the identity of our peoples, the family, religion, and the nation with its history, culture, language, and traditions. And to do this, they need to restrict the freedom of individuals to act according to their beliefs in the public square and at work, the freedom of parents to educate their children, and the freedom of churches to minister to their communities in a way that is consistent with their respective creeds. The violent demonstrations that we saw this past couple of years in Chile, Colombia, and the United States are emblematic of the cultural Marxism that's being promoted. They were hosted by the same activists, by the same host of people, and financed by the same institutions. While they may have begun as a reaction to one particular issue, when activists took to the streets, they were advocating for all their favorite issues: abortion on demand, so-called trans rights, radical environmental ideology, which has little to do with the environment, of course, you name it. And you see, the groups that help orchestrate these massive gatherings follow the framework of what Margarita de la Pisa mentioned yesterday, intersectionality. Which is a weird leftist theory that argues that oppression, all forms of oppression and discrimination are linked. So if you're going to demonstrate against racism, you have to also demonstrate for the rights of women to have an abortion or for so-called LGBT rights. The Black Lives Matter organization that led the 2020 riots in multiple cities in the United States proclaimed in a public manifesto, and I quote, "We work to disrupt the Western prescribed nuclear family structure requirement, and we foster a queer-affirming network." Moreover, they have openly and aggressively advocated for abortion, arguing, as they tweeted recently, that abortion care is health care. And this is an organization that fights racism. The left is unquestionably moving fast and making major political gains, enacting laws and policies that would have been impossible to pass just a few years ago, and on matters that would have been unthinkable to discuss and debate in the political arena. So let me give you a few examples of what has happened recently in the United States. Just this year, the Biden administration has fully embraced what we call in the US the woke agenda of the extreme left. Just this year, the Department of Education expanded its understanding of discrimination based on sex in federal law to include sexual orientation and gender identity, putting at risk the church's freedom to run its schools in a manner consistent to its beliefs. A few months later, the Department of Health and Human Services issued a series of reports at the federal level calling on states to ensure that children are given access to sex change or gender-affirming health care, as they call it, including sex change surgery and hormonal therapy. And finally, the State Department announced just a few months ago that citizens are now able to select an X as their gender marker in their passport to accommodate non-binary individuals. I'm sure that's great for international policing and law enforcement. In Latin America, just this past years, we've seen an incredible advance of this woke agenda. In a region where in almost every single country, poll after poll shows that the majority believe in the right to life, Argentina, Colombia, and Mexico have recently legalized abortion. And in Chile, a weak so-called conservative president, and beware of those moderate conservatives. I've learned that they're not moderate, and they're usually not conservative. In Chile, a weak president succumbed to the left's demands to establish a constitutional assembly, which has already produced a draft constitution that is the dream of the globalist left and could become a model for other countries in the region. It transforms the Chilean state from a subsidiary one, as defined in its current constitution, into a social state. It promotes a democracia paritaria, a democracy of equity, if you will, and gives the state the responsibility to promote, and I quote, a society in which women, men, diversities, and sex-gender dissidences participate in conditions of substantial equality. I don't understand part of that. It also legalizes abortion beyond the already accepted exceptions in Chilean law. In terms of the Organization of American States, its human rights bodies, especially the Inter-American Commission and the Court of Human Rights and the Inter-American Commission of Women, have been in the forefront of the effort to push the left's extreme ideology, advancing many of the issues of the progressive agenda, even before they began being debated publicly in the countries of the region. As it was mentioned, the left has been very effective in co-opting these organs, accommodating the radical activists in elected leadership positions, as well as appointed staff positions. Not surprisingly, these bodies regularly ignore the text of regional treaty law to fabricate and promote rights that have no basis on it. And in intervening in matters that are not covered by treaty law, they egregiously undermine the sovereignty of member states. Let me just give you a taste of the craziness of the activism of the Inter-American System of Human Rights. 2015, the Inter-American Commission of Human Rights used its authority to issue precautionary measures to prevent individuals from being denied a fundamental human right to request that the government of Paraguay give access to an abortion to a pregnant minor under its custody after being raped. In doing so, the Commission not only ignored the text of the American Convention of Human Rights, which guarantees life from conception and says nothing about abortion, but also to the Constitution of Paraguay, which expressly prohibits abortion. Just last year, the Commission, once again, in its effort to promote human rights, disregarded the text of the American Convention and in a press release expressed its concern about the adoption of reforms and initiatives by some OAS member states that restrict access to the interruption of pregnancy, while at the same time applauding Argentina and 2 Mexican states at that time for legalizing abortion. The Court of Human Rights, the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, 2018, in an advisory opinion requested from Costa Rica regarding benefits that should be afforded to same-sex couples, concluded that states should recognize and guarantee them access to marriage, even though the American Convention explicitly recognizes marriage as a natural institution between man and woman. A parallel universe. Pro-life activists and politicians have been monitoring closely the movements of the progressive left in the region and at the Organization of American States, and have been working hard to counter them. In the United States, social conservatives engaged Donald Trump early on, when he was still a candidate, and then worked closely with his administration. And as we know, President Trump became a stalwart defender of life and family. His administration put in place regulations that achieved the federal defunding of Planned Parenthood, the #1 provider of abortion in the United States, took bold executive action to guarantee religious freedom, and listened to conservative legal organizations like the Federalist Society and pro-life organizations like SBA-list to appoint 3 outstanding judges to the Supreme Court of the United States that would uphold the Constitution and oppose efforts to promote extreme ideologies from the bench. In fact, if the Supreme Court is close to overturning Roe v. Wade, and is going to do it, it's partly due, greatly due, to the appointment of these judges. Pro-life legislators have also partnered with advocacy organizations to push back against the Inter-American Commission of Human Rights efforts to promote the legalization of abortion in the region. In 2018, 9 Republican senators, led by Oklahoma Senator James Lankford, sent a letter to Secretary of State Mike Pompeo informing him of the Commission's pro-abortion advocacy and requesting that he cut financing to it under a provision of federal law, the so-called Cisgender Amendment, a provision from the 1980s, which says that federal funds cannot be used to lobby for or against the legalization of abortion abroad. Just a few months after receiving the letter, Secretary Pompeo made the historic announcement. For the first time in history, a U.S. administration was using the Cisgender Amendment to reduce funding to the Commission over its pro-abortion activism. And in Guatemala, President Alejandro Yamatei has had the courage to ban Planned Parenthood from entering the country. And I must say, Ambassador, I'm a fan of President Yamatei, and people know it. President Yamatei is now the object of the Biden's administration persecution, unfair attacks, bear on spurious arguments, which are really based on their disdain for his pro-life and pro-family policies. However, President Yamatei has not relented. He has been firm and has stood for life and family. And I'm not going to talk about Brazil because there's just so much to talk about Brazil. And the great work they're doing, and Alejandra is just a dynamo. Personnel is policy. We need good politicians because then we get great people like Alejandra and Valerie in administrations. Understanding that the American Commission of Human Rights has been co-opted by the progressive left, pro-values politicians and activists have been encouraging governments of the region and working with them to nominate to the Commission individuals who will defend the sovereignty of countries and defend the right to life and natural family as enshrined in the American Convention. Accordingly, Guatemala and Colombia nominated and got elected 2 outstanding jurists to the Commission who fit that profile. So now, 2 out of 7 commissioners in the Inter-American Commission are pro-life and pro-family. Think about it. If we get 2 more elected, we would have a majority in the Inter-American Commission of Human Rights. Think about what this could mean, not just for the Western Hemisphere, but globally. We would have a major regional human rights body standing for the right to life and the natural family, and willing to push back against any effort by the UN or any other multilateral organization to promote abortion and same-sex marriage. And finally, let me just say something that happened just 2 days ago, and it has to do with Geneva Consensus Declaration. Recently, the new president of Costa Rica said that he would review the decision of a previous president to impose therapeutic abortion by decree in Costa Rica. Based on that decision, a good friend of ours, known by many here, Fabricio Alvarado, who has run for president before and had a big legislative victory in the past elections, sent a letter along with other legislators to the president and made a speech 2 days ago in the Costa Rican legislature asking the president of Costa Rica to sign the Geneva Consensus Declaration. These efforts are crucial and must be strengthened and multiplied. So as I close, I want to encourage you to become even more active, more creative, more engaged in your efforts to defend the family. The reality is that political activism is now more important than ever. At the quick pace these radical policies are being pushed and implemented, if we don't redouble our political efforts, it may be too late. While I agree with what someone said yesterday, that generally politics is downstream of culture, at least in the West today, culture is also downstream of politics. So I want to encourage you to support and pay special attention to our pro-life politicians. Let's continue to support them with policy ideas, but also in political strategy and in the media when the opposition goes after them. Let's also recruit and train new leaders committed to the fight for life and family. And let's get them elected. Elections matter. Leadership matters. We didn't look for polarization. In the West, countries are politically polarized, and we are called to choose between the truth and relativism, and we have to choose sides. There's no room to be moderate. We have to choose sides. So let's continue the fight. Let's not relent, and remember that what we do today in the political arena will undoubtedly determine the future of our societies. Thank you so much.